Hello and welcome to the Authentic Wednesday podcast. Each week, my guest and I share our vulnerable behind-the-scenes stories of giving ourselves permission to take off our masks, let go of our expectations, and embrace our own path of freedom and authentic connection. I'm your host, Bianca Hughes, a lover of authenticity and a licensed professional counselor in Georgia. Hello and welcome to episode 18 of the Authentic Wednesday podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. As always, it is a pleasure to have you here, and thank you so much for your support in sharing the podcast. So today it is me. It is a solo episode, but I have something a bit juicy for you today on the podcast. You know how sometimes you have, I'll speak for me. I have, but I know this is probably true for other people. Someone tells you something and it's maybe not to a week later, a few years later, a few months later that you're like, oh, I get what they were saying, or, oh, this makes sense now. Oh, this is what they meant by blah, blah, blah. Well, that happened to me regarding the topic I want to talk about today. I remember being in university, and so I was probably about 20, 21, and I had a friend at the time, and we would hang out a lot. He was older. He was probably about maybe 5 or 10 years older. I cannot remember. However, so between 5 and 10 years older than me, but I always loved talking to him and having conversations with him because he had a wealth of knowledge about the world that I didn't have. And then it was great because then I would help him with his schoolwork, of course, because he was older. So it was a great match and it was a great support system whilst we were in university. And you know, I always love getting the advice of older people, especially older men, because they can tell you stuff about men that maybe I don't know myself. And so we would talk about relationships all the time, and he'd give me a lot of advice and a lot of help. And I remember one of the things that he told me was, I just remember it clear as day. I mean, some things just stick out. And he said this, Bianca, don't ever compromise. And he looked me directly in my eyes and he gave me, you know, that little wagging finger. And he said it more than once. Bianca, don't ever compromise. I heard him, but I can honestly say I probably didn't get it, didn't fully understand it. And I was like, okay. It wasn't something that at the time it registered deep down into my soul and into my being. And in particular, he was definitely talking about relationships. And so, shall I say, in particular, romantic relationships. And so I took the advice and it just sat. Now, when I say it sat, it just didn't sink in. I did, of course, get into romantic relationships. And of course, I compromised. I would say I compromised a lot because I was fearful of rejection. So whether that was perhaps having sex too early, i.e. what I mean by that is meeting someone and maybe I wasn't ready to have sex, but I was scared they were going to go and leave me. And I also wanted to feel wanted. You know, every woman has that desire to be wanted. Men do too. And so I can honestly say that I probably had sex too early, or compromise in the sense that maybe I really wanted to be in a relationship, but you know, sometimes you feel like, well, let me have sex first and then they'll decide if we'll be in a relationship. But really I wanted to do it the other way around, like be in a relationship and then have sex. That's a compromise, just so you know. And so other areas I probably compromised in is having unprotected sex. Again, being frightened of saying no. What would they say? What would they do? Also, sidebar, I will say that I have had sexual trauma. Have had sexual assault. So I have been raped before. So I also know that was part of that too at the same time as well. I.e., and what I mean by that, I mean like a fear of, in my situation with the sexual assault, I'll just say I said no. They were not happy. And of course, they raped me. And so for me, I know that was also part and parcel of it as well. So just so in case you guys are wondering or could kind of relate to that, that's another added thing in there. And so I was compromising on my values and the things that were important and not also valuing myself as well. in regards to my decision making. So it probably was not until about 5 years ago that what he said really stuck and really sunk in, and I really understood. Because for me, it was like, well, why wouldn't I compromise? In life, we compromise. We can't always have what we want. That's not how life goes. That's selfish, right? No. I remember that in grad school, we had this class, cannot remember the class now. I think it was a vocational class, and the point of the class was helping clients to decide on their career, because you can do career counseling. And we played this game called Value Sort Cards, and I'm going to put this in the show notes because I think it's a great game to, well, it's not a game, it's just an activity, shall I say. And I think it's a great activity for you to do by yourself or with a loved one, family members and friends. And so we basically had a list of different values. And with these values, we would sit and identify what was important, what was very important, not important, and maybe just important or not important at all, something like along those lines. And it really, seeing the words and the different values really started to sink in to me on what was really important to me. And so for that reason, I realized what he was saying to me is don't compromise on your values. Some of those values may be things such as excitement, faithfulness, family, fitness, courtesy. Don't compromise on those things that are really important to you, is what he was saying. And I finally got it, and I finally understood it. So I want to share a bit more on those things, on compromising on your value, because there is a difference. There's a difference between compromising on your value and compromising on your preference. So first of all, let's look at the word compromise. So to compromise is to settle a dispute by mutual agreement. And I want to highlight that, there's consent by both parties, or if there's more than one, all parties are agreeing. Okay? Then the other thing is preference. Preference is when we prefer something over another thing. I.e., for example, if I'm going to eat out, I would prefer to go eat brunch than go eat dinner. But it's not really a value. It's just a preference. It's just a choice. It's what I prefer. If I went to eat dinner instead of brunch, it would not be the end of the world. But that's just my preference. Another preference might be, for example, me, I don't really like to shop. So if I'm going to shop, I'm going to go on a Monday in the evening when there's quiet and there's no one around versus a Saturday. But I've gone shopping on a Saturday. You know what I do? I just make a compromise and I just prepare myself. It's not the end of the world. That's not a big value. It's not going to rock my whole world and what I believe in my whole life. It's just something I have to make an adjustment to. So now your value, when I talk about value, it's about what you believe and what's important to you in regard to how you live and work and function in your everyday world. It's foundational. It carries a sense of weight because it weighs in on your decision making a lot more than a preference. Think about it. Often when you're making some life decisions, and I'm going to go back to relationships, romantic relationships, you make a decision like, some of the time we don't make a decision and it just happens and we go with chemistry. But if we're going to go into a long-term decision, we're going to look at our values. Some people, their value is, I need someone with money. That's their value. It could be shallow for some people. It's still a value. It's still what's important. It's still what guides their decision making, if that makes sense. Culture is very important for me, for example. So I chose to live in an area that had a mixed culture of people because I appreciate that. That's what I was brought up around in London. My whole family is Caribbean and I'm just used to that whole mix. So that's important. Culture is so important to me. Definitely do make decisions based on culture. For sure. That's very important that stays in my life. So you guys are kind of getting the picture of how important and foundational values are. Some other values may be honesty. Obviously, we're talking on the Authentic Wednesday podcast. So authenticity, belief in God, being connected to people, like growth. Like growth is so important. Like people who like to grow. So you'll probably find in my circle, my friends are people who definitely are interested in growing and developing themselves. It doesn't mean they're doing it all the time, but that's what they do. They think we can have those conversations because that's important to me. That's a value system. Think about also like companies have principles or core values. And so they ensure rules and regulations all line up with a value. The products, the services, do they fall in line with our guiding principles, with our value? Like that's what it's all about. And so when he was saying don't compromise on your value, because they guide you. They lead you into the place where you're meant to be, into a place where you feel comfortable, in a place where you can feel authentic, where you can feel like you are you, where you can feel free. Think about times when perhaps you've done something and it's just, felt off. You just knew it wasn't for your value. I'll give you a simple one. Very easy. Sleep. I value sleep. Think about sleep, how valuable it is. Think about when you get a good night's sleep, how different your day is, how you function, how you operate, how you interact with people. And sometimes, we get pressured into doing things that compromise on our sleep, which is valuable. And then we pay the price and it doesn't feel good. And there are some times we compromise on our sleep where maybe we need to because it's an emergency. But when we're consistently doing that, I want to add the word in here about the consistency of compromising on our values, right? Because that's when we're going to really see the big difference. When we compromise on our values instead of our preferences, we don't feel good about ourselves. We question ourselves. We begin to lose parts on ourselves bit by bit when we are constantly and continually compromising on our value system. You may feel lost, you may feel unsure, you may not have a sense of your foundation or wondering how you got to this place in your life today. And it may be because you're doing things that don't align with your value. You're making decisions. You're hanging out with people. You're doing activities. You're in a job that doesn't line up with your value system. I mean, people work all the time at jobs that don't line up with their value system. The biggest one I can think of is honesty. Every company is not honest. And if your value system is honesty and your company has you doing something that's dishonest, that's going to change you over time. That's going to change how you view yourself. You're not going to see yourself as amazing or worthy because that shame begins to creep in. And so I want you guys to begin to see compromise. Yes, it's important. But when we are compromising on our values continually, it begins to be a problem. Compromising on your preferences is different. And I just want you guys to sit and take some time to think about that. Are you compromising on your values? Or are you compromising on your preferences? Or are you compromising on both? Which one of them feels more in line with who you are? Which one feels more authentic? Which one gives you more freedom? Which one gives you a sense of peace? And it doesn't have to be something big. Like I just mentioned sleep. Money could be another one. Your budget, right? We all do that in a way. It feels good at the time, but you're like, I did this again. And then what happens when we constantly go over and kept going over our budget? Then shame comes in and money shame comes in, right? So going back to compromising on our values. So you might be thinking, so what do I do? How do I know this? Oh my gosh, you got me thinking, Bianca. So what I want you to do is take some time to identify your core values. And I'm going to put some core values in the show notes for you. You can also Google them, but I'm just going to make it easy and just put a few of them in the show notes. If you want, you can also do the value sort card activity. I will also put that in the show notes for you, so you can just have an easy link for that. And what I would like you to do is take some time to identify your core values. What are the things that matter to you? Like, how much do they matter to you? You can kind of ask yourself the question, is it important to me? Very important, not important, or somewhat important? And you could just list the values in order of importance. Then, after you've done that, and often I would do this game. I love doing this activity with when I worked in a hospital for the educational group, and people loved it. We never had enough time, but they loved it. I put them in the groups and everyone would sit and talk about their values. And I love the results, because often you would find that people often had more values in common than they thought, and they learned more about people and themselves. And one of the biggest things people found out is like, wait a minute. First of all, I do have values. And two, maybe I haven't been living according to them. And maybe that's partly, not all, of the reason of where I am today. And so it's a very big awakening when you first just even identify your core values. Then you begin to be like, wait a minute. So if it's getting difficult and you're identifying them and you're like, wait a minute, I don't know if I am liking this because I feel funny and I'm not really living according to this, please don't stop. Just continue, maybe take a break and come back to it. Okay, but don't give up. So once you've done that, you can ask yourself that question. It's going to come up. Am I living according to my values? If you are, great. Like, continue to do this activity. I can honestly say that I probably need to update this for myself and just relook at my values, because things do change over time. That was one thing I always found from the group, is that the things that people valued when they were maybe in their 20s are different to what they value in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and so on. So I do encourage you to reevaluate them. And so here's what I do know. When I live according to my values, which is what I do for the most part, because I am able to be authentic, I am able to be free. It gives me more confidence to live authentically when I live according to my own value system. I find that I begin to align with people and situations that fit the core of my being or what's important. And I get really excited because I've taken that time out to not only identify them, but make decisions, interact with people, and do things that align with my value system. And so if you are feeling a bit lost or off balance, or not feeling like, shall I say, your foundation is somewhat shifted, it may be time to reassess your values and look at them, and are you living according to them? And this is, of course, a no judgment space. This is an awareness space. This is a growth space. So if you are not, it's not to judge, it's just to help you bring yourself more to that authentic core of you and continue on this journey of authenticity. Remember, I have not done this activity update for my values in a while, but it'll be interesting to do it. So I'll probably challenge myself and do it along with you too. So like I said, the value sort cards will be in the show notes, and also the list of values. So you can do either one or you can do both, whatever. And you can even Google if you need to find some more, or you need another word, or, because of course I won't have all the words, and in the activity won't have all the words, but it's just to get you started. So I really do hope this was helpful for you today. Please, as always, send me an email, leave a review, comment, just saying, especially if you're on Instagram or on Facebook, and let me know. I really want to know about this and how it all lines up for you in regards to your value system. And just remember, when you're making decisions, when you're going throughout your day and doing things and interacting and meeting people, and you're thinking about compromising, think about, is this a compromise on my value or my preferences? And if it's my preference, maybe I can work with it. But if it's my value, is it okay this time? Is this something I want to keep on doing? Or is it just a one-off? right? So it's not even black and white to say, oh, if it's compromising my value, I'm just never going to do it. Like, you weigh in that moment. Thank you so much for your time. Also, I just want to add, I know at the beginning I did talk about sexual assault and rape, and so I do want to be sensitive to that. If you are triggered in any way and you do have a therapist or a counselor, I do encourage you to reach out to them and get some extra support. And if you don't and you are still triggered, I will put some resources in the show notes in regards to counseling, sexual assault information. You may or may not be ready to kind of work through that, but I do want to be sensitive. I know, of course, I am in America, so I'll put those resources in there. If I do find anyone from around the world, I will put that in there, especially in the UK. However, if you are in another country, I do encourage you to Google sexual assault support, information, and resources, or reach out to your local mental health organization just for some support. And lastly, if you are in the Atlanta area and you do feel like you need some support, especially as we talked about core values, I am currently taking clients for therapy. So my website is biancakHughes.com. Or if you really like what I talked about and you need me to come and support your group and speak at your group or a conference in any way, you can also go to my website and just go to the tab that says speak and request. Thank you so much again for your time and look forward to hearing your feedback. If you connected with what you just heard, please subscribe, rate and review the podcast. You can stay connected by following our Instagram, Authentic Wednesday Podcast, and visiting our website, AuthenticWednesday.com. Remember, authenticity is a journey, not a destination.